The first day I told the guy who was doing my training, like, yo, I just want you to know, like, this is very temporary, like.
Teezo Touchdown stands apart in every way, refusing to fit into genres, trends, or labels, and instead crafting a world that feels entirely his own. At first glance, he looks like a contradiction. Nails in his hair, punk energy, hip-hop collaborations, rock influences, and somehow it all works. Not just as a gimmick, but as a fully realized identity. But here's the real question. How did someone this unconventional not only break into the mainstream, but get embraced by some of the biggest names in music? Before we break that down, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because this story isn't just about music. It's about what happens when you bet everything on being different. Long before the cosigns, the fashion statements, and the genre-defying performances, Teezo Touchdown was just a kid growing up in Beaumont, Texas, a place not exactly known for producing experimental, boundary-pushing artists. Born Aaron LaShane Thomas on October 31st, 1992, Teezo grew up in an environment where creativity wasn't handed to him. It had to be built. His father worked as a DJ, and that detail matters more than it seems. Because while most artists discover music from the outside, Teezo grew up inside it. He wasn't just listening to songs, he was watching how they were made, watching how crowds reacted, watching how energy could be controlled, shaped, and transformed. That early exposure planted a seed, not just of music, but of performance, and performance would later become one of his most powerful weapons. But the environment around him didn't exactly scream, future superstar. Beaumont is quiet, slower paced, far removed from the industry hubs like Los Angeles or New York. There's no fast track out, no built-in pipeline to fame. Which meant if Teezo wanted to stand out, he couldn't rely on location. He had to rely on identity. And that's where things start to get interesting. Because Teezo didn't just want to make music, he wanted to create something people had never seen before. In a world where most artists are trying to fit into existing categories, rapper, singer, rock star, Teezo went in the opposite direction. He blurred everything. You'll hear elements of punk rock in his sound, then hip-hop, then melodic pop, then something that doesn't even have a clear label. But the real breakthrough wasn't just in the music, it was in how he presented himself. The nails in his hair weren't random. The aesthetic wasn't accidental. It was intentional discomfort, designed to make people look twice, question what they were seeing, and remember it. Because in today's attention economy, being good isn't enough. You have to be unforgettable. And Teezo understood that early. But here's the part most people don't see. Being different doesn't get you accepted right away. It usually gets you ignored or rejected. Early in his journey, Teezo was experimenting heavily, trying to find a sound and image that felt true to him. And like many artists at that stage, not everything worked. There were moments of uncertainty, periods where the vision wasn't fully clear, times when the audience just didn't respond. And this is where most people quit. Because standing out sounds good in theory, but in reality, it's uncomfortable. It's isolating. It means you don't have a blueprint to follow. But instead of pulling back and becoming more normal, Teezo doubled down. He leaned further into the weird, further into the unexpected, further into the version of himself that didn't quite make sense yet. And slowly, that risk started to pay off. What makes Teezo Touchdown different isn't just that he's creative, it's that he treats creativity like a system. Every detail, from the music to the visuals to the fashion, feels connected, intentional, like pieces of a larger puzzle. And that level of cohesion is rare, because most artists build songs. Teezo builds worlds, but even with a unique identity, talent alone doesn't guarantee exposure. You can be original and still go unnoticed. So how did Teezo go from being an experimental artist in Texas to collaborating with some of the biggest names in the industry? How did someone so unconventional break into a space that usually rewards familiarity? That's where things take a turn. Because the next phase of his career wasn't just about creativity. It was about positioning, timing, and one of the most important cosigns an artist can get. The shift didn't happen overnight. There was no single viral moment that suddenly made Teezo Touchdown a household name. Instead, his rise came from something much quieter, but far more powerful. He started appearing in the right places, not loudly, not everywhere, but strategically. And in an industry where visibility is currency, being seen by the right people matters more than being seen by everyone. One of the earliest signs that Teezo was moving differently came through his collaborations. While most emerging artists fight for attention through volume, dropping constant singles, chasing trends, trying to go viral, Teezo took a more calculated approach. He focused on alignment, and that alignment began to pay off when he started working with artists who weren't just popular, but influential. When Travis Scott brought Teezo into his creative orbit, it wasn't just another feature. Travis Scott is known for building immersive worlds around his music, for prioritizing aesthetic, sound design, and experience over traditional formulas. That kind of environment is where Teezo thrives, because he's not built for conventional spaces. He's built for worlds that allow experimentation. Appearing on projects connected to Travis didn't just give Teezo exposure, it gave him credibility within a certain tier of artistry. It signaled that he wasn't just another new artist trying to get on, he was someone being selected. And in the music industry, selection matters. It changes how people listen to you. But the real acceleration came when Teezo crossed into an even bigger spotlight. When Drake included Teezo Touchdown on his project, it marked a turning point that couldn't be ignored. Drake doesn't just collaborate randomly. His features often act as signals, introductions to artists he believes are worth paying attention to. And suddenly, millions of listeners who had never heard of Teezo were exposed to him. But here's what made that moment different. Teezo didn't adjust himself to fit the platform. He didn't water down his sound. He didn't simplify his identity. He showed up as himself, fully intact, fully unconventional. And somehow, it worked. That's rare, because typically when artists enter mainstream spaces, they compromise, they smooth out the edges, they become more digestible. Teezo did the opposite. He kept the edges sharp. And that's when people started realizing this wasn't a phase. This wasn't a gimmick. This was a new kind of artist. As his visibility grew, so did the curiosity around him. People weren't just asking what his songs sounded like. They were asking who he was. Why does he look like that? Why does his music feel so different? Where does this style even come from? And that curiosity became one of his biggest advantages. Because in an era where content is endless and attention spans are short, mystery is powerful. Teezo doesn't give everything away at once. He lets people figure him out over time. Musically, he continued pushing boundaries. His projects didn't follow a predictable structure. You couldn't listen once and fully understand them. They required attention, replays, openness, and that naturally filters the audience. Not everyone will get it, but the ones who do stay. And that's how cult followings are built. Not through mass appeal, but through deep connection. By the time he began releasing more complete bodies of work, it was clear that Teezo wasn't chasing hits. He was building a catalog. There's a difference. Hits come and go. Catalogs last. And his approach reflects long-term thinking. Even his visuals, performances, and interviews feel aligned with that same philosophy. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels like it was done just to stay relevant. It feels intentional. As the industry started paying closer attention, opportunities expanded beyond just music. Fashion brands, creative campaigns, and cultural platforms began to take interest. Because Teezo doesn't just make songs, he represents a certain energy, aesthetic, attitude, and in today's landscape, that's just as valuable as the music itself. Artists are no longer just musicians, they're brands. And Teezo's brand is something you can't easily replicate. Financially, this stage of his career is where things begin to shift. While exact numbers aren't always publicly disclosed, it's clear that his income is no longer coming from just one place. Streaming brings in revenue, but for artists like Teezo, it's only one piece of the puzzle. Features, live performances, creative collaborations, and brand partnerships all start to stack. And because he's positioned himself as a unique figure rather than a replaceable one, his value increases. He's not competing on volume, he's competing on identity. And identity, when done right, scales differently. It opens doors that talent alone sometimes can't. But what makes this next phase even more interesting is how that identity translates into lifestyle. Because unlike traditional artists who showcase wealth in predictable ways, Teezo's version of success doesn't necessarily follow the same script. He's not defined by excess. He's defined by expression, which raises a different kind of question. What does success actually look like for someone who was never trying to fit in to begin with? Does it mean mansions, supercars, and luxury deals? Or does it look different? Because in the next phase of his journey, it's not just about how much he's earning, it's about how he chooses to live. And that's where things take another unexpected turn. By the time most artists reach this stage of their careers, the story usually becomes predictable. More fame, more money, bigger houses, faster cars, louder lifestyles. But Teezo Touchdown doesn't follow predictable paths. And that becomes even more clear when you look at how his success translates into wealth. And more importantly, how it doesn't. Unlike mainstream superstars whose finances are constantly dissected, Teezo operates in a more low-visibility space when it comes to exact numbers. As of now, his net worth is not publicly confirmed, and most estimates remain speculative. But that doesn't mean the money isn't there. It just means it's not being broadcast. His income flows from multiple directions, and each one reflects the type of artist he is. Streaming is the foundation, but not the defining factor. His music generates millions of plays across platforms, which translates into steady revenue, though not at the level of long-established global acts. Where things start to scale is through collaborations. Working alongside artists like Drake and Travis Scott doesn't just bring exposure, it brings financial opportunity. Features, performance royalties, and back-end splits all contribute to a growing income base. Then there's live performance. Teezo's stage presence isn't typical. It's theatrical, intentional, memorable, and that kind of experience carries value. As his demand increases, so do booking fees. While exact figures aren't publicly disclosed, artists in similar positions often command tens of thousands per show, with higher rates as their profile rises. And then comes the layer that many people underestimate: creative partnerships. Because Teezo doesn't just exist in music, he exists in culture. Brands are drawn to artists who represent something distinct. Not just popularity, but identity. And Teezo's identity is one of his most valuable assets. While he hasn't flooded the market with endorsements, his aesthetic and presence naturally align with fashion-forward and experimental brands. These kinds of partnerships aren't always about volume. They're about positioning. Even a small number of well-aligned deals can generate significant income, often in the six-figure range, depending on the scope, campaign, and exclusivity. And in Teezo's case, maintaining authenticity is part of the strategy. He doesn't attach himself to everything, which makes each appearance more valuable. But when it comes to lifestyle, this is where things really separate him from the typical narrative. Because success, for Teezo, doesn't seem to be about proving wealth. It's about expressing identity. There's very little publicly confirmed information about his real estate holdings. No widely reported multi-million-dollar mansions. No headline-making property purchases. And that absence is telling. It suggests a different priority. Instead of using housing as a symbol of status, Teezo appears to keep that part of his life private, or at least not central to his image, which is unusual in an era where visibility often equals validation. The same pattern shows up when you look at cars. There are no widely documented collections of exotic supercars tied to his name, no confirmed ownership of high-profile vehicles like Ferraris or Lamborghinis. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't have them. It just means they're not the focus. Because for Teezo, the spotlight isn't on what he owns. It's on how he presents. And that brings us to the one area where his lifestyle is impossible to ignore: fashion. If most artists use clothing as an accessory, Teezo uses it as a language. Every outfit feels like a statement. Every detail feels intentional. From the now iconic nails embedded in his hairstyle to the fusion of punk, streetwear, and experimental silhouettes. His appearance isn't random. It's constructed. And in many ways, this is where his version of luxury exists. Not in traditional items, but in originality. While exact prices of individual pieces aren't always public, high-concept fashion, custom designs, and avant-garde styling often come at a premium. It's not unusual for full looks in this space to reach into the thousands, especially when involving designer collaborations or one-of-one pieces. But again, The value isn't just in the cost, it's in the impact. Because Teezo understands something that many artists overlook. In today's world, attention is the real currency, and he knows how to capture it without saying a word. Even his accessories follow that same philosophy. Where some artists lean into oversized chains and traditional markers of wealth, Teezo leans into objects that feel symbolic rather than purely expensive. His look doesn't scream luxury in the conventional sense. It challenges it, and that's what makes his entire lifestyle feel different. It's not built around excess, it's built around intention. But perhaps the most important investment he's made isn't in material things at all. It's in his brand. Because everything he's done, from the music to the visuals to the way he moves, has been building towards something larger than individual moments. He's not just creating songs, he's creating a long-term identity. And that identity has value far beyond short-term earnings. Which brings us back to the question at the beginning. Why is Teezo Touchdown unlike any artist right now? It's not just the sound, it's not just the look, it's the discipline to stay different in an industry that rewards sameness. Most artists are trying to fit into the system. Teezo is building his own, and that comes with risk. Because when you don't follow a blueprint, there are no guarantees, no clear path, no proven formula. But if it works, the upside isn't just success, it's originality at a level that can't be copied. And that's exactly where Teezo is positioning himself. Not as the biggest artist in the room, but as the one you can't ignore. So the next time you see Teezo Touchdown, whether it's in a music video, a live performance, or a feature you didn't expect, remember this: you're not just looking at an artist, you're looking at someone redefining what an artist can be. If you made it this far, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Teezo Touchdown is ahead of his time, or just getting started? Thanks for watching.